Hi, my name is DROdio. I'm the owner of DROdio Real Estate Inc. I'm going to take you behind the curtain today, and I'm going to show you how commissions are paid because I found that many buyers, the majority, don't know how the realtor gets paid. So let's get started. First, I want to tell you a little bit about our firm. DROdio Real Estate was started in 2003. We've been featured in all sorts of publications for our progressive use of technology. And although I'm sure a lot of realtors are going to have a conniption fit for what I'm about to tell you, hopefully it'll be very useful for you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the commission split, how it works, why it exists, and what you can do to leverage it. First, let's define some terms. The listing agent is the agent that represents the seller, which is oftentimes confusing because the agent that represents the buyer is referred to as the selling agent or the buyer's agent. So remember, the selling agent does not represent the seller. The selling agent is the person who's actually selling the house to the buyer. But I'm going to use the term buyer's agent in this presentation just so that it's a little cleaner and easier for you to understand. So the fee is usually 6%. Now that cannot be set in stone anywhere because competition rules require that it be variable, but it's fairly standard in our market and in most markets in the US for the fee to be about 6%. That's what the seller pays to sell a home. So for example, if a home is selling for $500,000, the seller has to take $30,000 of that, of the proceeds, and pay it to the agents. The seller pays that at closing, and that money is, interestingly enough, paid to the listing agent under a contract that states that the listing agent gets all of the money. That is the first major point for you to understand. Almost all listing agreements state that the seller is paying the listing agent exclusively. There is almost never a provision in a listing agreement that states that the seller is paying the buyer's agent. In turn, the way it's set up is that the listing agent will be the one paying the buyer's agent if, and that's a big if there is a buyer's agent. So what happens is if a buyer's agent comes and shows a house, the listing agent is agreeing to pay half of his commission to that buyer's agent. So of that $30,000, half of it would get paid to the buyer's agent and the listing agent would take the other half. But what almost no buyer or seller understands, or just any layperson who's not in the industry, if there's no buyer's agent, the listing agent keeps the whole $30,000. Again, let me repeat that. The seller is only paying the listing agent. The seller of the house never, in any part of the contract between the listing agent and the seller, there's no part that says that the seller is going to be paying anything to the buyer's agent. What that means for you as a buyer or as a seller is that the seller is on the hook for the entire $30,000 regardless of whether the buyer comes with a realtor. And that's something that most people don't understand. What most people think is if they show up without a realtor, that seller is going to have to pay less of a commission, so the seller will be more likely to sell the house to someone without a buyer's agent. But that's not how the industry is set up. The seller has absolutely no motivation to sell the house to somebody without a realtor because he still has to pay that entire $30,000 out. So I hope that's clear. If it's not clear, you're welcome to call me and I'll get into more detail about it. Let me talk about new construction homes a little bit, and then we'll come back to what I was just talking about. A lot of buyers, about 50%, do not have realtors when they buy a new construction home. They think, I don't need a realtor for this process, which, in all honesty, it's fairly easy to buy a new construction home. But there are things that can trip a buyer up, and the buyer also needs to realize that, and most buyers don't realize this, if they come in with a seller, or sorry, with a buyer's agent, they're still going to be paying the same price for the house. So if you come in and you buy a $500,000 new construction home with no agent, you're going to be paying that same $500,000 if you come in and buy it with a buyer's agent. Now, the way the builders do it is they have a master spreadsheet at headquarters where they estimate, when they're first opening a development, they estimate that about 50% of buyers will come in without a realtor and about 50% of buyers will come in with a realtor. And so they price the home accordingly, knowing that they're going to give up a 3% commission on about half of the houses and they'll be able to pocket that money for buyers that come in with no realtors. What that means for you as a buyer is that you're in a much worse position without a realtor because you don't have an advocate there to represent you. So even though you think it's easy to walk in this market, I have been able to negotiate some pretty hefty discounts from new construction home sellers. And it's what I do for a living. So whether it's me or any realtor who's worth their salt, a realtor will oftentimes be able to come in and negotiate a better deal for you. And you're not getting a better price for the home just because you come in without a realtor. And by the way, it's by law that the builder cannot pay a commission to somebody who's not licensed. So if you think as a buyer you can walk in and get the builder to pay you that commission, they can't do it. It's legislated that a commission can only be paid to a licensed agent. So why is the industry like this? Well, I'm not an expert in this field, so I'm not going to necessarily be able to answer this question for you with the purview of history in mind. But I'll tell you that the concept of a buyer's agent is relatively new. So previously, there was only basically a listing agent that would handle the entire transaction with both sides. So the concept of a buyer's agent is relatively new, the last I'd say 20 years or so. But more importantly, realtors don't want realtors to go hungry. And what I mean by that is that the real estate industry, and I'm sure some realtors are not going to be happy that I'm saying this, but I think it's true. Realtors do not want other realtors to be cut out of deals. So, conveniently enough, things have been structured so that the seller has no motivation to sell a house to someone who doesn't have a realtor. And what that does is that forces buyers to use realtors when they otherwise might try to use a realtor without they might try to buy a house without a realtor. So that's my 2 cents, but I stick by my statement. Realtors don't want realtors to go hungry. Okay, so let's talk about what this means for you and what you can do about it. The most important thing is that you understand the process, that you understand that walking in to buy a new construction home without a realtor is not going to save you money, that you understand that making an offer on a house without a buyer's agent is not going to save the seller any money. Remember, not having a buyer's agent does not equal a better deal for you. I would argue, and of course I'm a realtor, I drink the Kool-Aid, but I really truthfully would argue that a realtor does play a very important role. I usually harp on realtors for not realizing what their true value in a transaction is. I think that a lot of realtors feel that their value is in driving a buyer around and showing them houses, and I don't believe that's true. I think that we as a firm can give you access to tools and technology that will allow you to do a lot of the research involved in the beginning part of the home buying process. But I do feel very strongly that the realtor plays a very critical role in helping you select the house from a couple that you like. And what I mean by that is looking at the house, looking at its structural integrity. Although we're not home inspectors or licensed contractors, we do this for a living, so we can often point things out that a buyer who does this once every 5 or 10 years wouldn't see. But more importantly, in negotiating the deal, negotiating terms for you, in realizing what's important. How many days should the financing contingency be? How many days should the appraisal contingency be? What kind of price can we reasonably offer? Tricks to figure out how long the house has been on the market, what the sellers paid for the house, how much they can even afford to sell it for. Just there's a ton of things that, just one little piece of knowledge could be the difference between five, ten, or $20,000 of discount for you. Also, there's a lot of things that can trip both buyers and sellers up. For example, when most buyers walk in to buy new construction homes, the builder says that the house will be built in January or in a certain month. It's a couple months away. Well, what a lot of buyers don't realize is that almost always there's a clause in the contract that states that the builder has 24 months to complete the house. And there's another clause in the contract, usually, that states that there are no oral promises, which means that if the builder is telling you January, but they're actually writing in 24 months, you could find yourself in a position where it's taking, 20 months longer for the house to be done, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so if the builder says that the house will be done in a certain month, I always make the builder write that in to a spot in the contract because it doesn't mean anything if it's verbal. That's just one example for new construction homes. I have plenty of others. There's also a lot of contingencies that can hurt both buyers and sellers. Oftentimes, sellers don't understand what a sale of home contingency means. That's especially dangerous in this marketplace where a buyer might say that he'll buy your home, but he has to sell his house first. Well, obviously, it's not an easy market right now for buyers to be selling the homes they have to sell in order to buy a new house. And that can really hurt the seller when you take the house off the market for 30 or 60 or 90 days only to find out that the buyer has the right to walk away with no repercussions. I'll give you another example. We had a seller who agreed to rip out the bar that he had installed in the basement of his house. Well, what he forgot to mention was whether or not he would warranty or guarantee the condition of the floor that was under the bar and also the walls adjoining the bar that he was ripping out. And one of our agents pointed out and wrote into the contract that the seller did not have any obligation to the condition of the flooring and the walls once that bar was ripped out. And I can just very easily see that there would have been a major issue where the seller agrees at the buyer's request to rip the bar out, but then leaves a mess behind, and the buyer feels like it's the seller's responsibility to fix it. So there's a lot of ways that you as the buyer benefit from having an expert to negotiate terms for you. And also listing agents I've found will oftentimes really take advantage of people who don't have an expertise. Even inexperienced realtors can just be taken for a ride by a very experienced listing agent. So I would caution you to be very careful when you don't walk into a transaction with representation. Just like, you wouldn't walk into a courtroom without an attorney. I really liken it to the same type of thing. You're making a huge decision that's going to cost you many hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's probably the biggest decision you'll make or will have made for the last 5 years. And don't walk in there without someone fighting for you. So here's my information. I'm the owner. My number direct to my cell phone is 1-877-437-6346. You can contact me at daniel@DROdio.com. We can help anyone who's in DC, Virginia, or Maryland, or by referral nationwide. We have a very extensive referral network, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have and be there for you as you go through this transaction. Thank you.